Hello, and welcome to the weekend review. I'm delighted to bring on John McGarry this week. John, we're without Callum Crowe. How dare he have a day off today? But I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts, because there's been another weekend of sport full of controversy, not least in the world of Scottish rugby. So we're going to get onto that in a second. But I just want to take a look, first of all, at today's back page. Repeat failure. Large admits he's sick of explaining Scotland's dismal run of results is our splash. And this reflects on Scotland's almighty calamitous defeat to Italy in Rome at the weekend. And it's Rory Darge saying that he's pretty much sick of reflecting on Scotland defeats, and then he goes into an apology to all the fans who made that trip across to Rome. But I know you were on football duty at the weekend, but what are you making of everything that's going on in the world of Scottish rugby right now?
Well, what I would say when I was watching the game off and on, it didn't come as a huge surprise to anybody. I mean, there's been the build up to this Six Nations has been dominated by Townsend. His future, denying that he's got other jobs lined up. I just don't think it was conducive to a bright start. Italy are obviously a good side as well. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing that you can't say you were astonished by it. A defeat to Italy many years ago would have been a surprise, but we've lost there in the past, and I just think this campaign is already doomed to failure. I know it's the Calcutta Cup on Saturday, and Scotland's record in that in recent years has actually been pretty good, and everyone will no doubt rally round. Yeah, there's just not a great atmosphere around the whole thing. There's not a lot of positivity around. And if we were to lose to England, so obviously they won their game against Wales handsomely, the whole situation is only going to escalate, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite interesting that actually we had a player coming out and being a little bit more vocal this time and a little bit more honest, because I think part of the problem is in the past is that we've had Scotland defeats and then players have come out post-match and it almost feels like they haven't lost. There's almost too much positivity about it. Now, I know that the players, of course, they have to remain positive looking ahead to the next game. They can't get too downbeat. But I thought it was interesting to see here, the fact that Darge was saying, actually, we are sick of being here and having these kind of conversations and actually apologising to the fans. So I wonder whether that was a step forward, whether all the news about Red Bull and whether Gregor Townsend's going to be joining Newcastle Bulls has affected the players. I very much doubt, actually. But of course, the next round of media articles over the ensuing couple of weeks will be about Gregor Townsend. We've had so much in the press about Gregor Townsend. There's been a lot of calls for his head. Let's face it, Scottish rugby are not going to sack him ahead of the England game. But I would personally be very doubtful if they get rid of him at all during the Six Nations. I think if it's a disastrous Six Nations, then I think Gregor Townsend will go at the end of the Six Nations, despite the fact he's got his contract until the end of the World Cup, so which is in 18 months' time. So it's a very interesting situation, but we've been there before. This is not the first time we've had many calls for Gregor Townsend's head. And as I said, it's not the first time that we've lost to Italy, and we shouldn't take anything away from Italy either. The fact that they are an increasingly improving side, they're a good side. But I think a lot has to be taken from the way that Scotland played, their tactics, their poor tactics. Was the selection right on the day? That's probably one that only Gregor Townsend can really say definitively for sure now. The whole thing is extremely interesting. As you point out, we've now got a huge match ahead against England at home, albeit where we have a good record against England. But whether Scotland can come out all guns blazing and actually do anything and actually win this one is very much in doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's been the one thing in recent times that's kind of has sustained Townsend, isn't it? His record against England is pretty formidable, But the minute that stops, on the back of a defeat to the Italians, if it was to happen on Saturday at Murrayfield, then there's going to be no hiding place for him. I mean his denial last week about the Red Bulls thing. You might say it was a kind of deflection tactic. He was adamant that it's not the case, that it was, an English media story. Well, time will tell on that one, but I do agree with you. I think come hell or high water, he will get this campaign. But, if Scotland are fighting for the wooden spoon or get a wooden spoon come the end of the competition, then I think his position would be, I just don't see how we could survive that.
Yeah, totally, completely agree. Well, we'll be delving much more into the world of Scottish rugby later in the week, so do stay tuned for that, particularly Gregor Townsend, his potential future with Scotland, and of course the big build-up to that extremely important match against England. Also on the back page today, we have a bit of football. So Old Firm to do battle in cup clash. And this was the news that came out last night that Rangers will host Celtic twice at Ibrox in the space of a week after both were paired in last night's Scottish Cup quarter-final draw. That's some game to look forward to, isn't it, John?
Yeah, I mean, it would be even in isolation. It was the one that really jumped out at you. What it now means in terms of Celtic season is that they have four monumental away games on the spin. So they play Stuttgart away in Germany, Rangers at Ibrox in the Premiership, Aberdeen in the rear age game at Pittodrie in the Premiership, and then this Scottish Cup clash at Ibrox. Now, those four games are going to go an awful long way to defining Celtic season. I mean, the league's already extremely tight. There's a bit of football to play before that, but Celtic have also got home games against Hibs and Motherwell either side of that. So, we're going to find out an awful lot about the new players Martin O'Neill has signed very quickly. They don't have an awful lot of margin for error. Let's be honest, it wasn't a draw they were looking for last night. They'll have a good support at Ibrox. That's one thing. They'll have a lot more than the usual kind of 2,500. I think was the last one, the last support they had there. They'll have closer to kind of 8,000-9,000 because of the Scottish Cup rules. But yeah, there's a real taxing period coming up for them. Rangers obviously breezed past Queen's Park in complete contrast to last year when they were humiliated at home by them. And there's a growing sense of confidence about Rangers. Listen, the league is the one that both of these clubs really want, as do Hearts. But the Scottish Cup is always a big prize as well, and it can help your season. It can. I think when you've got that positivity, you don't mind the extra few games that it brings.
Yeah, and just looking at this particular head-to-head, I mean, obviously they've got the top flight clash first, which will be a huge match in terms of the season potentially. But for the cup side of things, I mean, the cup often throws up these head-to-heads between Celtic and Rangers. Is massive for the cup, isn't it? In terms of the draw, in terms of the cash and everything else. But looking at the teams in the current form, who will be the happier with that one? I mean, you've alluded to it there. I would imagine you're suggesting that Rangers will be happier, not just because it's taking place at Ibrox.
Yeah, I mean, home advantage counts for so much. I mean, it's not quite as pronounced in a cup game because there is a bigger away support. But it's interesting if you look at these double headers. I know there is the Aberdeen game in the middle of them from Celtic's point of view. But if you look at these double headers down the years where Celtic Rangers have played against each other, very often, in fact more often than not, the team that wins the first game wins the second. There is a momentum that carries into to the games. You go back many years, go back to 1998, Rangers played Celtic at Celtic Park in the Scottish Cup and in the league, and they won both of them. There is a tendency for them both to go the way of the same club. There's no doubt psychology plays a huge part in that. In fact, it will be at the same ground as well. I think is significant. Yeah, Rangers would probably, if we're being honest about it, would probably rather avoid the Celtic as well. They've wanted one of the championship teams, but if they're going to get them, they've got them at home. Uh, they're definitely they're gathering pace. Their new players have made fairly decent starts to life at Ibrox. They've got a really tough game on Wednesday at Motherwell, notwithstanding the fact they dropped a couple of points to Hibs last weekend. But they're a pretty good place, and we're now approaching the kind of business end of the season, and Rangers will feel pretty good about these games that are coming up.
You mentioned Rangers and their victory over Queen's Park. I mean, that was a statement win, 8-0, absolutely massive win for them. And you were also at the Celtic Dundee match. I mean, what did you make of that one? Because I've spoken to a lot of people after this, clearly not Celtic fans, who were a little bit perturbed by the time that was added on at the end, because of course there was a last-minute goal that saw them steal the win.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know what? Credit to Stephen Presley, the Dundee manager, who after the game didn't really make much about that fact. I mean, the clue's always in the fact that when the board goes up, it's a minimum of 5 additional minutes. So the fact that the game actually went on for an extra 7 minutes, and I think Celtic scored in the 96th minute, isn't actually, it's not that unusual, to be perfectly honest with you. And fundamentally, Celtic, it was a good bit of play by Tunetke to set up the equaliser. And thereafter, I think Dundee's heads had just gone a little bit, But over the piece, I thought Dundee were worthy of the win. I thought they were really excellent in the game. They had a couple of opportunities to maybe get the second goal, which I think would have killed it. It was a really strange evening altogether because there was this boycott on the go. So, I mean, there were estimates that were maybe 25,000 in the ground. I thought it was maybe slightly more than that, but it certainly wasn't any more than 30,000. You had this really unusual situation where you could hear the shouts of the players quite clearly, and it just didn't feel like a Scottish Cup tie at all. I think that helped Dundee. And I don't think that the current situation where even when there's not a boycott on, Celtic fans are, they are staying away to a certain extent, and the atmosphere just isn't great because you don't have the Ultras group, the Green Brigade there due to the ongoing suspension of them. It's something that I think has taken away the fear factor of Celtic Park to an extent, and I think Dundee showed that again, that teams can go there and play with their freedom and can do really well. I think Celtic, the hierarchy must be thinking we need to get this sorted out because we're going to need every point we can get between now and the end of the season. We're going to have to get the atmosphere back because there's no doubt that it helps the team and it helps the manager, and without it, they're at a disadvantage.
Well, I know we're going to touch on Gary's column shortly, which kind of alludes to some of that in it. But just in terms of the actual football on the pitch, what did you make of Celtic's performance and new signings, and also what that does for them moving forward for the rest of the season?
I don't think they were great at all for 90 odd minutes. They were much better in extra time. And ultimately, listen, I'll have no shame about trotting out an old cliche. Cup football is about getting through, and they did that. And Neil, brought on Tunetke, who, started off well at Celtic, faded a bit, but he looks as if he's maybe got a little bit more about him now. Yeah, over the piece, Celtic were fortunate to make it through. The one thing I would say is they have signed 5 players on loan, and they've now got Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain on a deal until at least the end of the season. It's going to take a little while for some of these guys to bed in. Yeah, over the piece, you need to say that the 2 guys that they signed early in the window, Thomas Cavankara and Julian Aguero, have actually looked good. There wasn't an awful lot to judge the new guys on. Obviously, the debutant, Junior Amado, got his debut goal as well, which will do him no end of good. We'll need to see what Oxlade-Chamberlain brings, and obviously he was unveiled before the game. Nobody can really say. This is a guy who's won everything in football, in club football, at Arsenal and Liverpool. He's 32-year-old. He's not played since last May for Besiktas. Celtic have had mixed results in terms of signing players of that ilk in recent times. Guys like Freddie Lundberg and Carlton Cole, their best days were just behind them, so you can't say for any certainty what he's going to bring. But potentially he could be a good signing, and they certainly need an injection of quality. But over the piece, to answer your question, I thought it was pretty flat, um, uninspiring, and I think that's been a feature of a lot of games this season. Even when Celtic have won, they don't seem to be winning convincingly, taking 3 and 4 off teams, and I think that's a concern because that ultimately those kind of performances, the results do eventually catch up on you.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens then for the ensuing games. Just before we move on to On the Road, just want to have a quick look at Lindsay Vonn. A great picture on the back page today shows an image of Lindsay Vonn being helicoptered, airlifted out of Cortina. She had this horrendous crash yesterday in the downhill, and absolutely heartbreaking for her. And you can't actually see from the image here her face or her body at all because she's completely wrapped up in this huge red kind of blanket thing as the man kind of holds on to her. But it was, I don't know whether you watched it. I actually happened to be watching it live as it took place, and it was just absolutely horrendous. She obviously clipped the gate and then went flying, and it's just awful moment to see. And I guess a lot of people straight off the back of that did the usual thing and questioned whether Lindsay Vonn should have actually been skiing in the first place, given that she'd already ruptured her ACL and effectively went into this particular race with one leg.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, it's a great picture on the back page. I would also draw attention to the reporting by Riyadh, who's obviously over in Italy. I thought it was an outstanding piece that he's written about the incident, and just not only what happened, but what people were saying and the reaction to it as well. I mean, what really comes through in this, and I suppose that's a thing about a lot of athletes, who you've got an Olympic gold, was it 16 years ago now, and you want that second one, and the ability of elite athletes to put mind over matter, but sometimes that can be to your detriment. And whereas people are maybe thinking, you know what, maybe this isn't wise, and particularly after the crash, which was only January 30th, I think, that it maybe wasn't the wisest thing to do, that maybe this felt almost fated that this would happen. Oh, it was dreadful, really. I mean, you just feel kind of heart sorry for her, because let's be honest, those are the kind of things that people do remember, don't they? They'll obviously, you'll always have the Olympic gold, but in a way, it's very few top sports people get the kind of Hollywood ending. Everyone wants that kind of that great finale. They all chase it, or most of them chase it. Very few of them maybe realise that there's a point where you just got to maybe bow out and think my body's not up to this. And it's not just for the benefit of hindsight. That I think a lot of people would have felt that about Lindsay Vonn.
Yeah, I suppose the thing is, and I can understand the arguments, a lot of people making the point that actually Lindsay Vonn did not crash because of her leg. She crashed because she hit the gate. Her shoulder, I think, clipped the gate. So, and then she was just turned backward. So it was inevitable that she was going to fall at that point. So whether that, her leg impacted her directly on that, who knows? We'll have to hear from her herself. It has to be said that she was doing really well. She had this terrible ACL injury, and then off the back of that, actually skied well. I think she finished third just before going into this particular race. So it's not like her leg was causing her issues. So I can understand from her point of view if she felt that she was not invincible, but she felt that this was a definite possibility. She had a knee strapped up. She went into it and just desperately unlucky. But yeah, as we say, these questions will always haunt her, and I guess we wish her all the best and hope that it's not a lifelong injury that will hamper many other things as the years go by. Right, let's move on to Hugh McDonald's On the Road then. I know this is something that you find quite fascinating, and this week it's about the Lowland League. It's about Celtic B team in particular. So to be or not to be, that is the question for Celtic's young starlets. And she was along at Celtic B's match against Cumbernauld Colts, which Celtic won 3-1. What did you make of this article? Because I know that you've done a little bit of work on the Lowland League in your time, and also this speaks to the fact that maybe the pathway system needs to be looked at. Maybe there needs to be another route for young players coming through and getting more game time, if nothing else.
Yeah. I think Hugh really tackles this issue really well. I mean, if you were asked 10 different football clubs about youth development, player development, getting the best out of academies, you probably get about 10 different answers. I mean, back in the day, I'm old enough to remember when you really just had a reserve team and players who weren't quite ready for the first team on a Saturday. It was normally kind of reverse fixtures. Celtic were playing Aberdeen at Pittodrie. The reserves would play Aberdeen at Celtic Park. You'd obviously get a reasonable crowd go along to the game as well. The idea was it was kind of sort of men's football. So young kids would be in with experienced pros who weren't quite getting a game, players coming back from injury. There was an acceptance that you were learning from people who knew the trade. And I think it probably served Scottish football well for long enough. But then you get the advent of the academy system, and people will then look at different ways of doing this. The league has now been going for a number of years. It's effectively the fifth tier of Scottish football. As things stand, they are in it. Rangers were in it. They're no longer in it. Some clubs think it's better to play friendly matches against clubs with a supposedly higher calibre of player, and that's entirely up to them. It's going to be interesting because what we've seen now in Scottish football, and I believe this to be a good thing, is these cooperation agreements, which effectively means that players who where previously maybe the clubs were reluctant to send them out on loan because there was a lot of kind of drawbacks to that, a lot of red tape. There's now a greater freedom to that. So basically, most of the Premiership clubs have got one, two, or in some cases three relationships with clubs in different divisions where they can send players and bring them back at shorter notice if need be. So the thing's more flexible. And the idea behind it is that they'll get more football at a higher level than the Lowland League, and they'll be exposed to men's football, and not only that, but men's football in an environment where you've got points at stake and a crowd as well. So it'll be interesting. We'll really see in the fullness of time how this develops in terms of players that are going to be knocking on the door of the Scottish national team and indeed our biggest clubs. But the initial signs are encouraging in terms of players getting game time. So, in terms of where Hugh was at the weekend, the Lowland League, it'll be interesting to see the impact on this if Premiership clubs will in future see a reason to field teams in the Lowland League, or if they'll be satisfied with the cooperation arrangements. There's also the situation whereby I think the Lowland League is going to split into a more kind of a regional thing as well. That, in one sense, might make it more appealing because you won't have as much travelling to do. But the argument in favour has always been that it is less sanitised because you're playing against clubs like teams that used to be in the SPFL, your Cowdenbeaths and Albion Rovers. So you are playing against kind of more kind of hardened, experienced players. Whether or not it's the answer in the longer term, obviously Celtic believe it at the moment. They think that's probably the best solution. Other clubs think twice about it, but the Lowland League is certainly going to be there to stay in some format of another in terms of the pyramid system, in terms of clubs who are aspiring to get into League Two eventually. Whether it serves a function for aspiring professionals at Celtic and clubs like that to kind of hone their game and get up to speed in order to make an impact, to go back to club and make an impact, I think that remains to be seen. I think it's a constantly evolving thing. We'll see. I'll be interested to see next season because each year clubs, whether it's Celtic or Hearts, can decide whether to put their team into it or not. That'll be one to keep an eye on. It could be. I wouldn't be entirely surprised if in 2 or 3 years' time the kind of B team idea in the Lowland League has maybe is maybe history. I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes the case.
just to nail it down then, Hughes directly asked the question, to be or not to be, why wouldn't Celtic stay in the Lowland League?
I think it would be if enough of these players were able to go out on loan to Championship, League One or League Two clubs, they would be, by definition, it'd be a better level. They'd be playing with and against more experienced players. They might just feel there's more in it for them. There is one drawback to that in the sense that, like, so the coaches, I mean, Johnny Hayes, who's one of the coaches for the Lowland League team, obviously, if in the Lowland League, it goes without saying that they can see them all at the one time. They can see how they're developing. And you could do a hybrid model. You know, there's nothing to say you couldn't have a team in the Lowland League and also have half a dozen players out on loan at various clubs as well. You could do both, you know, but I guess it's the fact that, I mean, fundamentally, Celtic are trying to find a solution that sees, because they put a lot of money into the academy every season, they need to get more value from that. They're not getting enough players like Kieran Tierney and James Forrest coming through. There is a difficulty now in likes of the case of Ben Doak, where English clubs are looking at Scotland more closely than ever. This has a lot to do with Brexit as well. Previously, it was easier for English clubs to get players from overseas. Now they're paying close attention to Scotland. So it is increasingly hard, if there's another Ben Doak coming through, for Celtic to hang on to him. That's a matter of fact now. But Celtic have still got to strive to make sure there are more players coming through the academy system and eventually getting into the first team and staying there. So at the moment, they think the Lowland League is the best way of doing that. They have got some players out on loan as well. But I think it's something that they're going to have to pay close attention to, because I don't think they get nearly enough out of their academy. And by the way, the same can be said of Rangers as well. You know, I mean, obviously Finlay Curtis has just gone on loan to Kilmarnock. It's been a criticism that's been widely made of Celtic and Rangers for a long number of years now, that there's a lot of talk about academy, but there's not, you know, there's not enough players come into the first team at the end of it. They don't get enough boom for the buck.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what transpires with that one there. Yeah, interesting stuff about the B teams and the Lowland League. John. Right, I want to move now on to Gary Keown's piece. Celtic chairman Wilson talks a lot of sense. Shame it's all a little late. And this is about Brian Wilson, the interim Celtic chairman, and it's really where he stands right now with the fans. Is it too late? He basically wants to start having meetings with fans, which alludes to what you've said previously about needing to talk to the supporters, the lack of support in the ground as well. But is it too little, too late? Are they beyond the stage now of being able to satisfy the fans who've been unhappy with a lot of decisions that have been made in Celtic over recent times? There's obviously Nicholson as well. Lots of Celtic fans not happy with him as CEO. I thought it was quite interesting at the end of Gary's column, he points back to Dominic Mackay, who of course has been at Celtic not for very long before as CEO. I'm not quite sure what he was exactly saying there, but Dominic Mackay having a very successful career at the moment in the corporate world.
Yeah. I mean, I think Gary hits the nail on the head again with many things. I mean, the main question, or one of the main questions he asked of is, why is Brian Wilson doing this? Brian Wilson is interim chairman who has made it pretty clear he's no interest in taking that role in a longer term basis. Michael Nicholson is the chief executive of Celtic Football Club. He purposefully avoids any public profile. He's not done a single interview with the mainstream media since he took the role initially in an interim capacity in 2021. With Michael Nicholson, who's leading from the front in this and meeting supporters groups, it's a complete dereliction of duty. But Brian Wilson has at least kind of offered an olive branch. Whether or not it's too late would depend upon what's said I mean, if he's just going to offer empty platitudes and not really offer any explanations for things or any, um, sort of acknowledgement that things have got to change, then it's a complete waste of time. There's been a lot that has happened at Celtic that has still to be explained. I mean, you go back to Brendan Rodgers' departure. I mean, all the supports I've had on that has been this rant from Dermot Desmond, who is a minority shareholder. There's been no proper explanation from anybody as to why that's happened. So that'd be a good starting point. Nobody's also explained the process that led Celtic to appoint Paul Tisdale and Wilfred Nancy. People could see there were red flags with both cases. So I think Brian Wilson could do. Clearly, there are certain things that are bound by confidentiality. I think everyone understands that. But I think people could do with some more kind of clarity on exactly what happened, because both things were very questionable to start with. But I think more kind of generally, Celtic's entire operation in terms of stockpiling money, I mean, there was £77 million in the bank at last count. They're very good at that. They're not as good at spending it on players. Nobody seems to know why this money's there. I mean, the rainy day that they keep talking about. Well, at the moment, the rain is absolutely it's flooding through the roof, and they've still not spent a penny in this window other than the kind of loan fees and signing on fees. So the whole, nobody seems to know what's the big picture? What's the idea? What do they see Celtic as in terms of its standing in European football, and how do they propose that it gets there? You get the occasional soundbite, from Michael Nicholson about the club want to be world class and everything it does, but nobody really knows what that means, how they plan to get there, but just the actual functionality of the club. I mean, as I mentioned there, Dermot Desmond owns approximately 34% of the club. He's the largest shareholder. He's not the minority shareholder. But yet, whenever Martin O'Neill talks about having his coffee interrupted to answer the call to become manager, it's Dermot Desmond that phones him. It's not Michael Nicholson. So it's a very curious and unusual situation as to why this football club seems, and I do stress what seems, to be run predominantly by one person who doesn't own the club. I don't quite see what the role of the other directors is if basically what Dermot Desmond says goes. So I think Brian Wilson could do with explaining that. Is anything questioned? Is anything Dermot Desmond suggested ever questioned by people? It is a very, for a PLC, it's a very, very mysterious organisation, and in my view, it's completely dysfunctional. And I've no doubt there will be changes ahead in that regard. But I think certainly short term, I think Brian Wilson could do with meeting supporters halfway. I think he could do with explaining why the Green Brigade still locked out of the stadium, because it was an initial 6-game ban that seems to have been extended indefinitely. It's creating a flat atmosphere. It's not helping the team. It's not helping Martin O'Neill. And at the moment, Celtic need all the help they can get. If he is the board's representative, he could do with coming to the table with with something real to offer, rather than just kind of empty platitudes and excuses.
Yeah, it's curious because, as Gary points out, Martin O'Neill seems to be the man that's left to do all the talking, which is not fair, because his matters should be about what happens on the pitch, and he should also have a say in who he wants to bring in terms of players to the club. But the communication here does seem to be a major issue. That's why Brian Wilson is obviously going out to try and appease the fans. But as you've already pointed out, I mean, what can he say? He can only say a certain amount. Is he going to give the full story? I very much doubt it. If he's asked difficult questions, will he answer them fully? I very much doubt it. Maybe he doesn't know half of what's going on, but I saw him being rolled out on television a couple of days ago, and you're right, it is interesting that Nicholson does not seem to have more of a part to play, and we don't hear very much from Dermot Desmond either. But I guess this all kind of speaks to the corporate nature of this. Is Celtic Football Club, in a way, too corporate? Because when do we, and I guess if I was a fan, I'd be asking these kind of questions. What is the strategy here? When do you actually see the strategy in black and white? What is the plan? Have you got a KPI where something that's measurable and tangible, where we say we want to be here in 2 years' time, we want to have won X number of cups, we want to do this in the Champions League, and if we don't do that, that is unacceptable. It's a very strange situation at the moment that seems to be continuing, given, as you've pointed out, the fact that they have so much money in the bank, and in that respect, they're far superior to any other football club in Scotland.
Heather, I think those are questions that a lot of people would have liked to have asked Michael Nicholson, and were looking forward to asking him when Wilfred Nancy was appointed as manager. Michael Nicholson didn't turn up at that press conference. I thought it was really poor. He should have sat beside Wilfred Nancy and explained why he and the board felt he was the right man for the job, and he should have taken other questions, such as the ones that you've just outlined there. And that's just not a good look. And frankly, it's unacceptable. The chief executive of a massive organisation like Celtic, just to think I can get away with that, because nobody knows what they feel is achievable. In terms, I mean, obviously, it goes without saying that they want to continue to do well in Scotland, but in terms of where do they see themselves in the kind of the food chain of European football? You see clubs. I mean, nobody's suggesting that Celtic should be reaching the last four of the Champions League routinely, and clearly it'd be absurd to suggest they can compete financially with Real Madrid and Paris Saint-Germain. But we have seen clubs who are far smaller than them, like Club Brugge, achieve far more in Europe. And there's no reason why Celtic couldn't be a kind of souped up version of these clubs if they traded better, if they invested their money more wisely. But nobody seems to kind of feel that's achievable. Or if they do feel it's achievable, nobody says they feel it's achievable. Without wanting to, you won't, no club's going to make a rod for its own back by saying what they're going to do. But I don't think there's any harm in somebody at the helm say what they feel is achievable. A couple of weeks' time, we're going to be looking at Celtic playing Stuttgart in the Europa League. Celtic haven't won a knockout game after Christmas in Europe since 2000. For Martin O'Neill in charge last time, countless teams with a fraction of their resources have done that in that time. I just think there's a kind of busy nature to the hierarchy, in the sense that I don't think they really know what's achievable. There is no reason why Celtic couldn't be going far, not every year, but certainly occasionally in the Europa League. And they certainly shouldn't be losing 5 successive Champions League qualifiers, which they have, each to a team with a smaller budget. I just think when there's such a lack of communication, a lack of direction from those at the helm, I don't think it's any surprise that you don't really achieve a great deal in the kind of wider scheme of things, because nobody's really held to account over it.
Do you think that Michael Nicholson should stay on in this role, or do you think he's at risk of being moved on?
Michael Nicholson was the long-standing company secretary of Celtic. He's a lawyer, and every football club needs a good lawyer. And that's absolutely fine. And from what I'm told, he was good in that role. He only became chief executive in an interim capacity when the aforementioned Don Mackay left the role after 2 months in 2021. Then, after a short period of time, Michael Nicholson was promoted to become chief executive of the football club. Now, nobody knows who else was interviewed, or why Michael Nicholson was thought to be the right man for the job at this period in time. Now, if you're looking at Celtic's transfer dealings since that point, which is one of the main performance indicators you would measure a chief executive by, they've not been nearly good enough. They've overpaid for players because they've procrastinated in certain deals. They've missed out a lot of players because they have lowballed clubs and have then been gazumped. And the decline, up until they began to get players in the door this window, the decline in the squad over the past year was alarming. That's on the chief executive not getting deals done, and also the finance director, Chris McGarry. So I don't think there is, if you put that together with the fact that he seems to be entirely ill at ease with being scrutinised or being questioned in public, I don't think you can say that Michael Nicholson looks a natural fit for the post. Perhaps he regrets stepping up from his original post. Perhaps it would be better all round if he reverted to that and somebody, maybe somebody like Dom Mackay, who seemed to be a natural fit given what he did at the SRU, was allowed to come in and act the way a chief executive should act.
Well, according to Gary's piece, Michael Nicholson is also on a heck of a lot of money. So I'm sure a lot of fans have a real issue with that. But you haven't directly answered the question, John. Sorry to put it to you again. Should he go?
Should he go? Yeah, he should go. Yeah, should go. Will he go? I would not be in the least bit surprised if there's a structural change. I mean, Dermot Desmond, Celtic is a big part of Dermot Desmond's world, but this guy has got, all manner of businesses which he owns, unlike Celtic, which he doesn't actually own. I don't think there's any question that if his chief executives of his other companies were performing as Michael Nicholson does, that they'd be moved on and he gets somebody else in. I think there's a total lack of faith in the guy, and I don't blame him for taking the opportunity in the first place, but I don't see Celtic have really gone places under him in the time he's been in charge. And, you look at across the city, at Rangers, where the Americans very quickly realised that Patrick Stewart wasn't a natural fit for them, and he moved on, and Jim Gillespie will be filling that role soon. Yeah, if I had a spare tenner, which I don't, I think Michael Nicholson will not be Celtic chief executive in the longer term.
Don't worry, no one has got a spare tenner or even a spare penny these days. Great stuff. Thanks to you, John. Where are you off to this week ahead then in terms of football?
In terms of football, I'm doing Celtic against Livingston on Wednesday night, which on the face of it should be a fairly straightforward win. On Sunday, I cannot wait. It's going to be Rangers against Hearts. Ibrox, we're really getting down to kind of nitty gritty now in terms of the league. I mean, there's not a lot of room for error now. Rangers are at Motherwell on Wednesday. Feels like a really, really big week for them. Hearts obviously a setback last week against St Mirren, so they'll be looking to bounce back in style. Yeah, I mean, I think this it's been a fascinating title race up to this point. I mean, listen, who's to say if Motherwell if they could pull off? It would be a huge surprise if they were to beat Rangers on Wednesday. But are we then talking about a possible four-way title fight? There's certainly there's a lot to admire about Motherwell. But yeah, there's a lot of great football coming up in the next week and indeed the next few months. And yeah, I think it's been said so often. It's one that you'd anticipate going right down to the wire. So every game is vital. So can't wait.
Yeah, it's certainly been a great season so far. Well, look, enjoy yourself. Good luck with all of that. If you want to check out Hugh McDonald's On the Road, do have a look at Daily Mail Sport Online pages and on Mail Plus, where you can also check out Gary Keown's weekly Sunday column. Plenty more rugby later on in the week as well, so do look out for our Six Nations preview on Friday with Stephen Don and Callum Crowe. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.